This is the story of my early childhood. I was born at Yerkes Observatory. It's an old Victorian observatory built in my grandfather's day. My grandfather was an astronomer, so were both of my parents. This big place was built with a lot of elaborate artwork, and it's an interesting design. It was done in the Romanesque style. This is where I played when I was a little child. I learned to walk in this chamber here. I remember crawling across the floor and looking at all the fancy designs. And I thought this was like our home because my parents spent a lot of time over here. So I spent a lot of time over here. All of us children were allowed to run around the observatory without any hindrance at all. For example, oh dear. For example, here is a pillar that has pictures of the zodiac. You can see some of the zodiac figures here. But it also had caricatures of faces of people who were known to the artists. And this particular face that is coming into view frightened me a lot when I was a child for some very good reasons. I didn't like that face at all. It haunted me. On the other hand, I enjoyed seeing pictures like this one here representing Pegasus, which is not from Yerkes Observatory, but is pretty close in design to the Yerkes carvings. There's also the chariot of the sun with the 4 horses flying through the air I like to look at too. All kinds of things. Anyway, on with the story. One day I fell asleep in a hammock on a nice late summer day, early fall. The hammock was attached to 2 oak trees. I woke up and found myself totally alone, and the sky was very black and there were lightning strikes coming out of very dark clouds, and the wind was blowing very hard. I jumped out of the hammock. It was quite chilly now because of the cold wind blowing, and I decided to go find my mother. I was only 5 years old at the time, and of course quite scared when I saw what was going on. It was getting dark very fast. My mother came from California, never had seen tornadoes before, and the neighbors told her if she left the windows open, the tornadoes wouldn't destroy the house. This storm probably had tornadoes in it. I ran inside. The door practically flew out of my hands. All the wind was blowing through the house and the curtains were flapping everywhere. It was pitch dark. I was screaming for my parents. My parents were hiding in a cellar because they were afraid of the tornado. I decided to turn on the lights because I didn't like it being so pitch black, but already the power lines were down, so it just stayed dark. The lightning was lighting up everything pretty strongly, and of course I got very scared. I decided, being a very small child, the safest place to go was to hide under the covers in my bed. So I ran upstairs, jumped into my bed. My bed was a Victorian bed with steel frame around it. And the curtains were flapping in the wind, of course, and the window was facing me. And I could look straight out the window at this immense oak tree that stood there like a centennial. It was more and more frightful. Everything seemed to be lifting up as well as blowing around. My hair was standing up. I felt very peculiar. This sensation of peculiarity is hard to explain to people who've never been hit by lightning. Suddenly I thought that the tree and I were united through the open window. My covers sort of floated off, my hair was floating all around, and I felt as light as a feather. And we all decided to be on the same cosmic plane, so to speak. This was very sudden, the switch from sitting around being a person and being suddenly part of the universe. The lightning bolt seemed to lift me through the air, and from my point of view, I felt as if I was being suctioned out of the house and into where the tree, the storm, and the lightning was all coming together, and that I was no longer in normal space but in something quite different, something what we would call an out-of-body space. It was very strange to feel. Lightning is not white, it's actually blue and yellow, and it weaves together. It has form and shape, and I felt like I was being sucked down it, and at the same time disembodied, which is why I show the two hands reaching from opposite ends. You feel like you're upside down and inside out all at the same time. It's a very strange feeling, being torn apart. As I fell into that deep hole, I came out on the other side. It's sort of like seeing something extremely heavy and you're falling towards it, but you're not falling, you're actually being turned inside out. And so it was like looking at the lightning from the inside instead of the outside. And extremely heavy, large things were the same weight as light, feathery things, and a feather came floating down alongside me, and I wondered why that was. So I looked up and I grabbed at more feathers, and I grabbed hold of Pegasus' wing. And as he went charging by, because he was tearing along like a lightning bolt himself, with sparks and fires coming from his hair and his wings, and he was storming along and huffing and making noise and just yanking me along, and I hung on for dear life, knowing that if I let go I was going to die. At the end of this wild ride, he kind of let me go, and I slid down between the trees, the lightning, and the storm, and landed on the earth again. And my father was yelling at me at that point because he was trying to revive me. I had been knocked across the room, of course, by the lightning bolt. This was my first encounter with Pegasus, the ancient lightning god, the constellation, the creature which I use for my emblem, so to speak. I've been hit by lightning more than once since then. And I guess this is how we communicate. I don't know. It's just the way my life decided to unfold. I and Pegasus get to join together periodically in a rather bizarre way. And I hope this doesn't ever happen to anyone else. It's really rather painful and difficult to live with. And I have other stories to tell about Yerkes Observatory because a well-known astronomer raped me when I was very young, and that also shaped my life, just like the lightning bolt, in a different way, but equally strong. It's hard to talk about, but I guess eventually I'll be able to pull myself together enough to describe how that came about and how it got fixed.